Is Judaism for or against capital punishment? Matot Maseh 5783. Years ago, as a member of the Delaware Board of Rabbis, I was asked to sign a petition asking the governor to place a moratorium on the use of capital punishment. The hope was that all the rabbis would sign and we could speak as a united voice against capital punishment. So I stopped and I asked myself, what does Judaism say about the issue? After all, I was asked to sign as a rabbi. On one hand, the Torah calls for capital punishment. We see it in the Parsha. Mot yumat harotzeach, the murderer shall surely be executed. You intentionally kill somebody, the penalty is execution. We've already seen the blasphemer executed and the man who gathered wood on Shabbat executed for violating Shabbat. Stoned. When I say stoned, by the way, I don't mean he got high. He was stoned. He was executed. There's a call to execute the Zakein Mamre, the rebellious elder who defies the Bet Din, the court, as well as the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the stubborn and rebellious son. Even though here, the Talmud, at least there's a view in the Talmud which says this was never actually meant to be carried out. We can learn other things from this piece of Torah, but an execution of a child was never actually meant to be carried out. The Mishnah refers to execution as a mitzvah. We have a mitzvah to engage in sakila, stoning when appropriate, sreifa, burning, and by the way, people were killed first, then only burnt symbolically afterwards, herek, killing with a sword, and chenek, strangulation. Yet, the adim, the witnesses, are warned before they testify, and they're told, look, if you kill somebody, it's as if you're killing the entire world. If your testimony causes this person to be executed, they then in the future will never have children. A whole line will be wiped out, and it's as if you've killed the entire world. But then afterwards, they're quoted Mishlei, Proverbs, Va'avod Rashayim Rina. When the wicked perish, there is joy. In other words, if you're really sure what you saw, you are absolutely sure that this person is guilty and deserves to be executed, by all means, testify against them. We need to take this person off the streets. We need to remove them from the world completely. Right after Osama bin Laden was killed, I received a call from a reporter in Delaware. She asked me, Rabbi, how is it that you teach kids not to celebrate when even the bad guys are killed? I immediately thought about this Mishnah and the quote from Mishlei, from Proverbs, speaking about when the wicked are destroyed, when they perish, there's joy. And I said to her, it's true, we're not joyous when anybody is killed, even a bad guy, even an evil monster like bin Laden. We're not joyous in the sense of, hooray, this is great. Everybody is created B'Tselem Elokim in the image of God. But we're joyous in a relieved type of sense. Baruch Hashem, thank God the world is rid of this monster. Yet, opponents of capital punishment cite the Mishnah in Makot. A Sanhedrin that puts a man to death once in 70 years is considered a murderous one. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, even once in 70 years, that too is a murderous court. Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva proclaim that if they had been on the Sanhedrin, on the court when they still had the authority to execute people before the Romans took away that authority from the Jewish court, they say nobody would have been executed because they would have deliberately tripped up the witnesses to invalidate their testimony. In other words, they're saying the death penalty is just too dangerous. We don't like it. And people argue today that it's cruel and unusual punishment, and God forbid the wrong person can be killed. You can't undo it. Even without the judges themselves advocating for the person who stands trial, who's accused, and faces capital punishment, it's extremely hard under Jewish law to carry out the death penalty. You need two men to witness the crime who are shomer mitzvot, observant of Jewish commandments. They have to say to the person right before they commit the crime, excuse me, if you go about and worship this idol or kill this person, you are actually liable for capital punishment. The person still has to commit the crime right in front of them. The system is rigged for acquittal, even to the point where if all the judges vote that the person is liable for capital punishment, is guilty, the person walks. Why? Seems counterintuitive. The concern is groupthink. In other words, everyone quickly coalesces around the idea that this person is guilty, and we're missing a perspective. Remember 12 Angry Men from high school? 11 of the 12 jurors immediately decide this is guilty, and they're ready to have this guy put in jail and throw it away to Kate. And one guy says, no, stop, we have to think about this a little more. And as they speak about it, they see as a real possibility the guy is innocent. The concern is if all the judges say he's guilty, somebody has missed something. That's only one side of the argument the Mishnah and Makot brings. The discussion actually continues, and of course, opponents of capital punishment don't quote the next part. Rabban Gamliel counters, if you're not going to execute people, if you are going to ensure that everybody who is charged with a capital crime walks, you're going to have a lot of murderers running around Israel. He's arguing that the death penalty is a deterrent, and we still argue about this today. And simply put, it's impossible to prove one way or the other because you can't prove a negative. We don't know if somebody decides not to commit a crime because he might face the death penalty. What we do know is that the Mishnah allows for leniencies for the death penalty to be carried out in emergency situations. For instance, if the dayanim, the judges, are absolutely convinced that somebody is guilty but don't have the proper witnesses, and they say, this guy has to be taken off the street, he's a repeat offender, he is just a danger to society, we have to remove him from the world, he'd be put in the kippah, which meant a dome, be in prison, and they feed him barley until his stomach would explode. They kill him that way. The Rambam in Hilchot Malachim, the Laws of Kings, says that a king could have somebody executed without the proper witnesses if he feels that the person is a threat to the tikkun olam. Tikkun olam doesn't mean here that we're going to repair the world. That's a much later understanding. Here it means the person is a threat to the social order. The king feels somebody is a threat to the kingdom, a threat to society. The king, even without the witnesses, could have the person executed. Nowadays, we'd say the CIA or Mossad would take out somebody before they could harm others, before they could commit a terrorist attack, even though we don't have the proper witnesses and judicial proceeding to sentence them to die. So these were the source materials I was faced with, and in the end, I decided not to sign the petition simply because I felt the source material was too ambiguous. Now let me share my personal feelings. You can certainly disagree. These are not my personal feelings. I have mixed feelings regarding the issue. I don't think that the death penalty is cruel and unusual punishment. And Dennis Prager had something very profound to say about this. He points out that people who oppose the death penalty often argue it on grounds that it's cruel and unusual punishment. But then they argue putting somebody in jail for life is even worse. So he says if putting somebody in jail for life is even worse than capital punishment, we also shouldn't be putting people away for life because that's certainly cruel and unusual punishment. My view is the death penalty may simply be the appropriate punishment for certain crimes. What would it say about our society if we couldn't remove these monsters from our midst, such as war criminals? Imagine the Nazis at Nuremberg hadn't been executed, or the Israelis hadn't executed Eichmann. Are we so impotent as a society that we can't remove these monsters? My only hesitation regarding the death penalty is, God forbid you get the wrong person. Yusuf Salam just recently won a victory in the Democratic primary for New York City Council. He was one of the Central Park Five who was wrongly convicted of the rape of the Central Park jogger years ago. Now, he never faced the death penalty, but he was convicted of a serious crime. Goes to show that somebody can be wrongly convicted, and if they're executed, obviously you can't undo it. In his case, obviously, he suffered tremendously. He lost years of his life, but at least he's still alive and free. Let me conclude by saying that often people when dealing with these contemporary issues such as capital punishment or abortion, for that matter, will try to buttress our arguments by citing Jewish law. They'll say that Jewish law is for capital punishment, it's against capital punishment. Jewish law is for abortion, it's against abortion. When you hear that, take it with a grain of salt, because as we've just seen, these issues are often nuanced. At best, when people try to buttress their political arguments by invoking the Torah, they are mistakenly misusing the Torah's mantle at the expense of Yosher Dat, of being intellectually honest. They simply want to say, look, the Torah agrees with my politics. That's not the point of the Torah. Yet, Torah is relevant to the modern world. The Torah's wisdom provides us with values we can apply to our modern world that help us to make informed decisions on these difficult contemporary issues.